So today we are really happy to have Hannah to be our guest speaker today. And Hannah is an enthusiastic business analyst with more than 10 years of experience in complex projects. She now contracts as a senior BA, and when she's not working, she writes and talks about real-world business analysis. And today she is going to share her insights on BA modes and how we can use this concept to find the right BA role for ourselves. Welcome, Hannah, and now the floor is yours. I will stop sharing and give the sharing to you.
Okay, awesome. Hello, everyone. Firstly, can you hear me? Is a good place to start.
Yes.
Okay, good. And can you now see the screen? Okay, cool. That's the classic thing you've got to ask in all virtual meetings, right? Is first, is the tech working? Well, kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Hannah Pearson-Coats. I am a business analyst based in Wellington, New Zealand. I currently work as a senior contract business analyst, most currently with the small but mighty team at Paper Kite. And I am here to talk to you today about BA modes. And we're going to cover off basically this BA modes concept that I came up with, how it might help you in your work, how it might help you identify work you really like, and we'll cover off briefly how to upskill. And it's going to look a little bit like this as an agenda. But basically we'll just rattle through the modes. We'll have some discussions along the way, really keen for any questions at the end, and hopefully this is helpful. But first I want to do what I pretty much do in every talk, which is some disclaimers and caveats, which is that this is a squishy concept. This is not science. And it is just a concept that hopefully is fun and can help. So it's not a thing that you're going to be like, here's a rigid matrix of 2 + 2 = X mode BA. It's more of like just helpful framings to talk around the kind of work we do as business analysts, kind of in general. And yeah, hopefully a fun concept that can help. And with that out of the way, I kind of want to explain what's it all about. So the BA modes concept came from an article I wrote quite a while ago now, and then developed into a LinkedIn series, and then developed it further into bad modes. But the reason, the actual why behind it was that I think we increasingly talk around our business analyst role as this big generic bucket of things. The problem is that it's so broad that it's practically meaningless. And we use these terms like product analyst, business analyst, technical analyst, senior business analyst, except they are pretty much meaningless when you actually get to what they're doing on the day-to-day. And so it's just really, really unhelpful in terms of finding out what role you're going to like, what role you'll be suited to, and how to upskill to get a particular role. The other thing that caused me to look into this is that I don't think we spend enough time talking about all the aspects of the business analyst role that isn't analysis. I don't know about you, but when I started, I kind of thought that I'd be spending most of my days like in a spreadsheet, doing critical thinking, solving deep problems. And honestly, I spend an almost scary amount of time in that kind of deep analysis, critical thinking space. I spend all my time on request of the organization around it, like doing all these other things that didn't quite fit into this mode of like what I had kind of envisioned in my head as like a little junior BA when I started. And so I wanted to talk about all those other things that are super, super valuable that we don't talk about as much. So that's the kind of starting point. And so what is a mode? Well, it's just a way of working. It's just a concept of like, how do we package up a series of like activities together and talk about it in a reasonable way? And when I talk about a mode, like analysis mode or facilitation mode, I'm not talking about that a mode is one-to-one matched with a job or a role. Usually a job would require a mix of modes, but the spread of the modes that they will be requesting from you and the amount of time you spend in a mode will vary depending on the job. And tools and activities also aren't one-to-one. For example, I might be doing acceptance criteria writing as part of like a delivery mode, like just churning it out for the team and running at like an execution. But I also might be writing acceptance criteria as part of like a massive analysis mode piece where I'm decomposing a huge system. So like activities and tools are not one-to-one with a mode. But in general, a piece of work will be wanting you to operate in a particular mode, and that's where they can be helpful to make sure that you're focusing on the right thing. Because if an exec or your manager wants you to do actually the outputs investigation mode, like find the answer to a problem, they probably don't want you to go away and spend 2 weeks deep diving in analysis mode. So understanding what the ask is and then being able to respond in the right way is incredibly helpful. So without further ado, I want to just run through, these are the modes, there's 9 of them. They're a work in progress, happy to discover more modes if there are them, but they're analysis, investigation, delivery, facilitation, design, documentation, communication, strategy, and crisis. Those are the 9 modes. We're going to go through them kind of rapid fire in a sec, but I kind of want to set it up with an exercise for you guys, which is hopefully where it will become more helpful to you. So when I go through them, I want you to be creating 3 lists. You can do it mentally, you can write down a piece of paper, write it into your phone, whatever. But I want you to ask yourself first, does this mode sound like fun? And by fun, I mean, do you want to nerd out about this mode? Do you want to chat to people over a wine and be like, yeah? Or can you envision yourself in it being like, oh, it was really awesome, I was doing this thing, and kind of playing it out in your head? Is this something that you really want to be working in? Second question, do you think you've got natural talent in this mode? Because not everyone's going to be excellent at everything, but there is some natural skills that you're bringing to the table, and it's worth kind of thinking about which talents means that you could play most naturally in a role, in a mode. And last, but by no means least, I want you to have a meh list. And by meh, I mean just things that you're just kind of yeah, I could take it or leave it. Because there's always going to be parts of the role. It's quite rare for someone to think that all of the modes are equally awesome. And it's kind of a case of it's really easy to work out what you don't want. If you ask your partner, what do you want for dinner? And they say spaghetti, and you're like, ugh, gross. At least you've now limited what you're looking for to N minus spaghetti. And so it's kind of worth knowing what you kind of don't want to be looking for, because you can kind of steer away from particular roles and jobs. Okay, does those instructions make sense? I saw a thumbs up, so I'm going to roll with that 1 thumbs up. Cool, so let's talk about the modes. I'm going to do this fairly rapid fire, and please sing out in the chat, which I've got open down there if I am too rapid fire. But it's just that we've got a lot to get through, so I'm just going to go for it. So I'm going to start off with the one that we all kind of feel probably the most familiar with, analysis mode. So this is all about deep diving into the detail and building out a comprehensive understanding. So this is all of there's a reason why I used a science, because this is what we're doing. We're decomposing things. We might be doing things like checking for completeness and consistency, decomposing systems and information, conducting thought experiments, identifying interdependencies, synthesizing information. But in reality, we're just going deep down, really thinking full in the details. This is pretty much common, at least a little bit, in all BA roles. It would be unusual to not have at least some component of analysis. So you kind of need to have analysis mode in your toolkit and be comfortable with it. But there are roles where it's a lot more common. So anything to do with data, big thinking like that, you'll have analysis mode much more common than, say, you would in a delivery team role where you're actually working with other people who are doing that big deep diving, and you're more about the coordination across multiple activities. But it's quite a different mode than number 2 on our list, which is investigation mode. So investigation is we're a detective. We're commissioned to solve a case or a problem. And we usually hunting down the answers to stuff. So you might be doing things like conducting interviews with SMEs, conducting root cause analysis, writing problem statements, collecting facts and data, synthesizing evidence, drawing insights and hypotheses, and just doing research. So by investigation, we don't mean research as in we go to the library and check out a couple of books. It's about what information is out there. And that information could be in process models that exist. It could be in people's heads. It could be in an exec pack. It could be anywhere. And someone will know the answer, and your job is to hunt it down. People are usually naturally good at this, or find it a bit awkward because it usually involves a whole bunch of knocking on doors and being like, hello, sup, can I ask you some awkward questions about a thing in order to be able to hunt down something or find a lead? You kind of got to be a little bit proactive. But very different, because the outputs of it isn't a comprehensive understanding. It might just be a high-level option set. I found investigation mode is way more common than we think. Because often, an exec, when they're asking us for something, they're wanting this a lot more frequently than they wanting us to spend 2 weeks doing analysis. Very fun though. And very different from delivery mode, which is our third mode. So delivery mode is all about when you're in a cross-functional team, typically, and your job is about the production or the execution of a plan. You're working with a team to build and implement, and that's the entire purpose, is the creation or the execution of something. You might be doing things like refining backlogs, estimating effort, project planning, prioritization, breaking down work into tasks, monitoring team delivery, verifying outputs, and working really closely, usually with some kind of product owner, delivery manager, CDM, those kind of roles. This is increasingly a really frequent ask for BAs in the market. So when I was doing some hunting through job ads, you could see the ask of understanding how backlogs work, understanding how the delivery side of the role works is quite common. And so this is a very frequent mode. And I spend a lot of my time in the mode, I've kind of specialized in this space. So you can see this much more on if there's an agile, if you're asking to work on an agile delivery team, you'll likely spend most of your time in delivery mode is the kind of analysis that you'll be doing. Very much collaborative, working with other people. You can't really be go away in silos. So if that's your jam, then delivery mode is a very, very cool mode to be in. Number 4 is different from all the rest, though in subtle ways. So design mode is about creating something new. And by new, I don't just mean designers in creating a painting. I mean, you might be creating a new process. You might be creating a new idea. You might be creating a new concept. It's about building something, a solution to a problem that you've got. And that's where the BAs really shine in the design mode space, is that we're really grounded in what the business is trying to do, so that we really bring making sure something is conceptually coherent and fit for purpose is our really key value add. So you can be in design mode when you're collaborating with other people and creating. So when you're working with a UX designer or any type of designers, you could be in design mode working with them. Sometimes you're in design mode all on your own when you're building new processes or designing a new business capability. It's basically all about the creation. And if you are into design mode, you'll find it much more common in that kind of product space, or when you start getting into lead and building new business processes. It's definitely an area where either you kind of really, really like it, or you're less interested in the creating new. The tweaking is also the kind of opposite. But very fun. You might be doing things like prototyping, synthesizing, wireframing if you don't have a UXer on the crew, and definitely creating new processes, tools, and solutions. Next up is facilitation mode. So facilitation mode is kind of something that often doesn't get talked about as being a thing that is an ask for a BA, and yet is a thing that in my experience has been expected of the role frequently. So when you're in facilitation mode, you're not analyzing, you're creating space for other people to go through some kind of process. It's very, very hard to be both a good facilitator and to be a participant at the same time. Those are almost I know some really amazing people who can kind of do it, but they're kind of doing it because they're just that good and they can kind of hack both sides of the puzzle at the same time. It's really hard to juggle. So when you're being asked to facilitate versus inputting, they're very different things. And so if you are hey, run a workshop on blah, you want to be really careful that you're being either asked to facilitate or you're the analyst building a requirement set, etc. But basically the entire point is to help a group of people create or find alignment in whatever they're doing. So it might be designing and planning workshops, facilitating decision-making processes, guiding brainstorming sessions, encouraging participation, moderating discussions, doing the whole parking lot thing. It's just kind of all of the things involved in how people communicate together and come and make decisions together. Basically, your job is to help a group of people have an outcome. Number 6 is either people love it or they hate it. Documentation mode. Now, documentation mode, very different again to all the modes that come before it. Like, you're no longer doing the analysis, you're no longer doing the deep dive. You are making sure the right information is stored and persisted for later use. So this is really, really important for lots of reasons, because you can't, people taking the agile concept of like no documentation to the extreme is just wild. Like, we need to know what happened in order to not make the same mistakes or to understand the context of a particular decision. So documenting the key parts of information around like how a decision was made, when it was made, what the context were, what the options were, and getting that down in a way that's easily retrievable and easily understood is an art form, and is definitely like a hugely valuable part of what we do as business analysts. So in this, it's about being like hugely objective, being really, really clear, and being able to record the details. It could be, you could be doing things like documenting requirements, compiling meeting minutes, cataloging information, all of that organization information architecture. So anytime you create a new section on the intranet or in Confluence, you're in documentation mode. Your whole job should be focused on, in 1 year, when someone comes along and looks at this, what do they see and how do they navigate this information? It's very, yeah, I can see in the chat. Yes, as a contract BA, like, it's something that, it's not my favorite mode, but it's definitely something that I have made myself get better at, because it's such a freaking powerful value add to an organization. 7, comms mode. Now, comms mode is, again, very different from the rest of the modes, because if you're asked to be doing something in a comms mode way, you are no longer about the thinking and the analysis, you are about the communication of that. So if someone's asking you to like summarize information, it's not about relitigating the information, it's about what are the key points. This is something that becomes increasingly important as you get more senior and you're dealing with senior stakeholders, because you cannot give them a 60-page document and expect them to read it. They need the bullet point list of why this matters, why they should care, and what their options are to do with it. Comms can be anything from trying to communicate something big to communicate something small. It could be external, it could be internal, but you might be doing things like drafting summaries, key messages, stakeholder analysis, publishing information. The stakeholders analysis is important, because unless you know who you're talking to, how can you possibly design something in a way that lands efficiently with them? Doing lots of public speaking and diagramming, like, there's a bit of visual design for like really good communicators, because words and like talking isn't necessarily the right way to communicate. And so being careful around that. Comms mode, super, super powerful and becomes super, super important. But if you're not into that kind of communication, like, you'll probably need to be dealing with roles that are less about the change internally. So like comms and change kind of go together. Like, if you want to be involved in change, you probably need to upskill in comms. If you want to deal with execs, definitely upskill in comms. But basically, at the end of the day, it's about making sure that everyone has the information they need in a way that they can actually use. I'm really interested to know if people are really like into this particular mode, strategy mode, or not. Number 8 is strategy mode. Very powerful mode, usually a more senior mode. But basically, it's about your kind of coach, like you're working with an organization. I can see Yasmin say, I was like thinking of you and I was like practicing earlier. Strategy mode is a particular mindset where you're dealing with the conceptual, the big part of an organization. Why is the organization there? What does it do? How does it do it? How can we move it into the future? What is the threats? Those are all like really big picture strategy thinking. So unlike, this is where us business analysts are super helpful, unlike management consultants, we have like real world practical experience around how to actually move a company forward. And that's where we become a real powerhouse for an organization if they engage us on a strategy level. Now in strategy mode, you might be doing things like strategic recommendations, identifying long-term business goals, competitor, enterprise, like market analysis, like all of those big kind of like what's out there in the world and how's it going to impact us. Usually quite big picture, that there is elements of strategy mode that you'll find really on the ground in like product strategy of being like, how are we positioned? How do we talk about it? How do we land this business case? How do we land the funding? So there's definitely like big stuff, but can be applied in really small ways. So if you want to be building into the space, you should be building up experience at that smaller level. But yeah, it's either like something that you're really interested in or not. And last, one of my personal favorites, crisis mode. Now, crisis mode is interesting because it's kind of like all the other modes, but compressed into a tiny time frame, because either something's gone wrong and you're just responding, in which case you're doing like rapid response to the issue. And that could involve anything from impact analysis, risk management, root cause analysis, options analysis, immediate response planning, crisis comms, like delivery, planning, etc. You'll note that all the words I used were reflected in all the other modes, because you're kind of doing like this weird mix of everything in rapid fire order. It's a really compressed thing. You either like adrenaline and you want to operate in this mode, or you don't. If you don't like adrenaline, you should avoid roles that have like a in production live system being used by users. You're less likely to need crisis mode if you are doing a big, long waterfall project dealing with process transformation in this quiet way. You are likely to need it if it's in a big project where there's lots of stuff going wrong, because you don't need end users to have a crisis. You just need people and high stakes. So if you like it, look for the production systems. If you don't, there's definitely a whole bunch of roles like, data analysis doesn't usually have crises unless you're dealing with a massive migration and things go wrong. I, for one, love crisis. So I usually stick to, you'll note that the ones I like is like the crisis delivery. So I'm up in that space and I hang out. That's typically where I hang out. But yes, to Sophie's point, you actually don't want to stay in crisis mode for very long. Your whole point is to like defuse the issue, put out the fire and get back to current state. And that's because if you stay in there too long, you kind of go, well, crazy. The point of crisis mode, yeah, identify next steps to get you back on track. Cool, so that is the 9 modes. Apologies if I did talk too fast. We had analysis, documentation, comms, delivery, investigation, strategy, design, facilitation, and crisis. So which ones resonated with you? Does anyone want to share? Do I have anyone who was like everyone? I liked all of them. Didn't have anything in the near list? Well, while you hopefully have that, and you're welcome to share, because I'd be really interested to know which ones vibed and which ones didn't, more importantly. I want to talk about naturally good versus specializing just for a short bit. Because, sorry to tell you this, if your mum told you the opposite, but you will not be naturally good at everything. And mastering a mode requires investment. So one of the reasons why I've ended up in the space that I have is because I'm quite naturally good at crisis, practical thinking. I'm a farm girl, like practical kind of runs in my blood. And so I have natural kind of talent of being like, okay, what needs to happen? What's next? That kind of coordination. But that only gets me so far. I've spent most of my career massively investing in my ability to like prove myself as a delivery, like specializing in delivery. So I've got project management training. I read a ton of books on delivery, on flow, on agile methodologies, plus old school methodologies. Like I spend genuine amount of effort investing on top of the natural talent that I've got in that area. Huge amount of investment there. Conversely, I'm actually not super good at strategy. Yasmin and I actually had an interesting conversation about that. That's not my strong suit. I'm way stronger when you've chosen a direction and then you get me to come in and deliver to it. But up until that point, like I can help an organization, I can kind of bumble around, hopefully do some good, but I'll be nowhere near as good as someone who's naturally good at the kind of conceptual thinking required of true strategy mode thinking. And so the thing that's good for you is to think around what you're good at, and where do you want to invest in order to be able to like really be, this is the thing that I do. But you can also, so upskilling is a thing. Now, I realized really quickly that I could talk for about 30 minutes on upskilling. And so instead what I did is I just made a resource, and this was almost, I just spent a weekend kind of pulling together resources that I have liked for particular modes and how I've kind of upskilled in it. There's a ton of books. There's a ton of like links to like YouTube channels that I have used for various stuff. Almost everything on the list I have either used myself, read, like properly read. So there's no books on there that I haven't read. Or there were 2 that I reached out to people for help of what they would recommend in there. And so hopefully these are helpful as a resource starter for things. But with that out of the way, I want to talk about business analyst jobs. So modes are conceptual. Jobs are what you get paid for, right? And so to illustrate the kind of how jobs and modes kind of fit together, I wanted to talk through my last 4 roles. Importantly, they all have the same title, which is crazy. But the first one was oh God, I'm terrible at like backwards time. Some years ago, this role happened. I was brought on at the start of a big project to kind of help set it up in a way. I was interestingly hired because of my delivery experience, and so that I'd be able to, like, when the time came, if we got the trigger to move into delivery, I would be able to be there and shepherd that through. But the phase that we were in was purely in design and that kind of upfront big thinking, which meant that I spent most of my time in design mode, facilitating mode, and in kind of comms and crisis, because it's a big project. Big projects always have kind of like an element of crazy, and some strategy. So I spent most of my time with the solution architect and the business architect and working out what does this look like in future state. After that, I needed a break, so I took a role on a small API delivery team. And so a complete switch into delivery mode. My whole day was spent in Jira, talking to a dev, writing API specs, which is what the documentation is there, like deep into like API delivery land. A tiny bit of strategy when we're talking about positioning and how to get funding for the product, like how the product is positioned, the API products long-term, but it was very much a technical BA type role dealing with APIs. And then I did a role that I think probably stretches the limits of what you'd call a BA role. Arguably, I call it some kind of principal advisor, where there is a point where, but it was kind of like this chaotic role where we just worked on whatever came down the pipeline at any point in time. One day you'd be doing an exec pack, another day you'd be doing options analysis, the next day you'd be back to another exec pack, you'd be like doing then a deep dive into like a current delivery project and something was going wrong and you're into crisis mode. Those numbers are made up. I've got no idea what I spent my time on, but I did a lot of PowerPoints and had a lot of like investigation time, but it was just whatever came down the pipeline. You'll see more varied when you think in terms of job roles out there. The more senior you get and the more into the lead space, because the expectation is as a senior or as a lead that you can deal with whatever. It might not be your mode, but you have to deal with it. Yeah, you might not like documentation mode, but hey, you just inherited this project that you need to have all the documentation signed off in order to be able to like meet some weird deadline. That's kind of what like being a senior or lead is all about. So there is some overlap there, but in reality, this is much more of a principal advisor than anything else. And my current role with the small and mighty dev team at Paperkite, back to my core skill set, which is like delivery mode, working with a team, building a product, we're delivering tech, pushing stuff to prod, all of the good stuff. So I spend most of my time in delivery, small amount of design, working through with the tech lead, etc., small amount of analysis, and facilitation, because I'm running refinement sessions, etc. Plus comms, because I'm doing a bit of like RFP responding and like that kind of thing. So you can see 4 roles, and I'm a contractor, so I change roles fairly frequently. Very different spread of things. Which is to say, all B roles are very different, And the trick is finding a role that suits you, and job ads can hint at the kind of modes that they're going to expect from you when you're actually in the door. And I really want to caveat this again with, this is squishy, and this was me just hanging out in Seek, taking screenshots of things. But I took, I think, 4 roles, and I kind of looked at the ad and pulled out some representative kind of copy that for me would indicate that they're going to expect you to operate in this mode at least some of the time, or that's a component of the role. So this first one is a systems and business analyst. You'll note that the titles seem fairly meaningless. So this first one is talking basically about delivery. Total ownership of continuous improvement projects that involve the job management system. Classic delivery. Ownership basically means delivery. You're the first point of contact for all issues. Now, if you didn't know, if you're the first point of contact, that's going to involve crisis mode, also probably investigation mode. So if those are not modes that you feel strong in, this is probably not a role that's going to, because anytime you're touching a production system and that you're the first point of contact, those are definitely going to result in the kind of crisis investigation shenanigans. But here's a totally other role. This is a technical business analyst role. It's with a recruiting company, so I couldn't get more information. Contribute to the functional solution design. So at least some of the time you're going to be in design mode there, right? This one, you're going to like working with end users. You're going to gather input and consensus through workshops or interviews. They're definitely going to expect you to be at least good, competent at facilitation mode. That's what they're going to want you to bring. But they're also going to want you to work on test plans and test activities, plus UAT, working with delivery teams. So in other words, classic delivery mode core. So it's actually, what's interesting about this is that I wouldn't put technical business analyst in that title. It feels more like a product digital role. But that's what I mean about titles are kind of odd. This is just a business analyst role. It's with a council. Key player in transformation IT projects, writing support documentation, you're in delivery mode is the answer. Like these projects, you're going to have to support them. That's delivery mode. Maintaining a comprehensive understanding of business systems, services, and processes. That to me feels definitely like documentation mode. Like if the word comprehensive is there and you're maintaining it, that feels like documentation. But of course, the classic review and optimize of business processes. That also feels like analysis mode. You're out there working out what is going on, how to make it better. Here's a senior business analyst. This one's with AIA. Facilitating workshops to assist in the planning process and successful delivery outcomes. Facilitation, obviously. This is all about engaging with stakeholders, developing business cases, and ensuring alignment with strategic goals. Sounds like strategy mode, but also a bunch of comms mode in there. Like if you're dealing with business cases is a combination of the output of analysis, but also communicating it in a way that's compelling that either gets signed off or not. But those are just kind of representative examples. The truth is you're not going to like all roles and you're not going to thrive in all of them. You put me into a role that needs to be operating in full-blown analysis and documentation mode the entire time, I will go crazy. But put someone else who is definitely like deep dive, critical thinker, really wants to be in that detail into my role, and they'll just like feel overwhelmed with the chaos. The trick is to find roles that have a match, right? Knowledge is power. Understanding what you're looking for and knowing which modes you are so you can talk about them and articulate them and be like, I'm really good at this. I'm great at communicating complex issues, or I am great maintaining comprehensive like documentation sets, and that's what I enjoy. So understanding what you want is the first step. But then being really critical around what role is asking from you, because you shouldn't think about it as I want a BA role. You should be thinking about it as I want a BA role that is matching what I want, because you just won't really enjoy all of the roles. Basically, you want to match. Which I think is already in the chat, which is awesome. If you're interested in hearing more, there's an original BA modes article on my website about that. Link in the chat. I also extended the concept to talk around bad modes, which is basically all of the modes, the bad twin. So for analysis, you've got paralysis mode. For investigation, you've got presumption mode. And it's all of the things that when we're going wrong in our role, it's just a helpful way to think of, we're not always awesome. And we can actually do damage to the systems and things we're operating in, not necessarily like consciously, but it's worth thinking about that because not everything we do is amazing. Follow me because I natter all the time on LinkedIn, or reach out and connect, and pretty much we'll say hi and connect to everyone. Also, please feel free to subscribe to my Jimmy Briefs newsletter. It's fortnightly. Basically, I natter about business analysis stuff and you'll be notified if I have an article out. And I'm doing a thing coming up, which is inaugural office hour, which is basically me and someone who I rate nattering through a business problem faced by someone. And so we'll collect, like, think of it as agony aunt, but on the fly and live. That's not recorded, so we can give you frank advice about how we'd deal with it. No idea how it'll go. Sounds like fun. Natter over lunchtime. Sign up and you'll get notified when I announce it this week. And that is it. I didn't put the timer on, so I've got no idea how over time I am.
Yeah, it's quite on track.
Yes. I will stop sharing my screen and I'll hand it back to Mavis.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you so much for introducing the line modes and show us how to identify different modes in the job description. And now we will move on to the Q&A session, and we'll start to share my screen. Yes. Let's have a look. Would you have questions now? Oh, we have got a lot of questions already. So the first one is, project holders sometimes have a narrow mindset on the most they think BAs can do. Any tips to educate stakeholders on the wider modes we can help in?
Yeah, that's a great question. You're not always going to be able to change stakeholders' minds, but honestly, like every time you get like a commission for a thing, go back with, hey, I can do this, or I can do this and you'll get this outcome, or I can do this and you get this outcome. So start surfacing that there is not just one way. Like if they're saying, I want requirements, you could be like, okay, cool, I could take this approach and you'll get this, or I can take this approach and you'll get this. And that starts kind of broadening them out from their request into the kind of adjacent things you could be doing. Otherwise, like sometimes it's not our job to educate stakeholders and just surface that up to people around you. So BAs, often I feel like we take on quite a lot in projects, and that's what change managers, it's what project managers are there to help support us to do. And so leverage those as well.
Okay. So we will move on to the next one. Feel like constantly juggling all these modes on a daily basis. How to move away from or to a few key modes?
That is a good question. That's going to be about the org. So some orgs will have this thing where they're like, cool, we don't know who does this, so the BA can do it. And then the role gets bigger and bigger and kind of more complicated and kind of like grows and bloats. That is not the case. In fact, you'll find the opposite is really also quite common, where you have literally one thing that the organization is expecting from you and kind of narrows you down. Like, unless you've got a pathway to like work on it with your manager, you should just be looking for, I mean, to be blunt, an exit strategy to a role that is more your vibe. Because some people will like the, I'm juggling and I'm kind of fingers in all the pies. And if you're not into that, then find a role where there is much more of like, what you're here to do is to manage these particular system, this one system with these stakeholders, and here's your one pipeline. Yeah, so it's going to be more about the org than anything else.
Okay,
I think.
thank you. The next one is how to balance delivery mode. There is also a squad lead, and the roles requirements are blurry.
Ooh, I want to ask a clarifying question. Is the squad lead a delivery lead or a technical lead? Because I feel like the answers would be different.
Can anyone clarify it?
Or you could just give both answers.
Okay, I can make it harder for me, Jason. Okay, like, yeah. There's like always this weird thing you go onto a project where if there's a scrum master and there's you and there's a delivery lead, you kind of got to have a conversation. You got to be like, okay, cool, guys, we could all do each other's role, particularly if you're a senior in it. Like there's so much overlap between those things. You just got to have like the adult conversation of, okay, cool, I'm particularly good at these things. Let me manage that. I'm less strong in these things. So how about you take lead? Honestly, it's about a conversation. And you kind of just need to have that out. It's made much trickier by like organizational hierarchy around the edges and politics, etc. So like you might need help from your BA lead or your BA manager, etc. to like have that conversation. But it is just a conversation because of the overlap. Technical lead is a different question because you're coming from massively different disciplines. And at that point, you need to make sure that you are not stepping on their toes because you do actually want your technical lead to lead the technical. And so you, in some respects, sometimes when I've seen clashes between like a tech lead and a business analyst, it's actually not necessarily the technical lead that I'd be like, hey, get out. I would be like, hey, you need to make sure that you're actually enabling the technical lead to lead the technical and you can strongly lead the business or the kind of the strategy space in that. So it kind of like depends. Good things to do would be to get an outside perspective of the problem because often when you're experiencing a thing, particularly when there's overlap between people, you're the least objective. And so like having someone to bounce off, like, this is what's happening, this is how I'm experiencing it, what can I do? Super valuable. So lean on your like BAs or other people around you that you trust to give you some serious advice so that you can plan your way out. Okay. Hopefully that's an answer.
Yeah, thank you. I think this one we already have covered it, right? How to switch between different modes. So
kind of, though the multiple projects things becomes hard. I guess I would say that is about the same organization. If an organization's got you on multiple projects, or multiple projects limits your efficiency overall. Like that's just truth from context switching. But it's about the organization positioning you in a way. So it would be about having a conversation with your manager if that's not fun.
Yeah, I've got tickets now. Next question is, how do you think business analyst and system analyst positions are similar or not? What difference do you see? And the system analyst.
My first BA role's title was actually systems analyst, which is fun. I think over time they are blurring. With technology being a core part of how we do change, you're expected to understand systems. You cannot be a business analyst without knowing at least the shape of systems that we're working with, right? I'm actually working on a piece with someone around how to think about those kind of systems analysts. But honestly, I feel like the role title is increasingly meaningless and you should look for the content of it because people will talk about systems analyst and what they're asking for is a classic enterprise business analyst or a lead business analyst, or they could put the BA title on it and want a systems analyst. So I think it's less about the title and more about what are they actually wanting you to do in the job.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. This one. The next question is, if you were starting out your BA career and wanting to discover the BA modes that might give guide or vibe with you, how would you plan this out and take action?
I'm hoping, though I'm really keen on feedback on this, I'm hoping that some either make sense to you and you'd like them and vibe in them, or they feel like they're naturally, like you're either the person who everyone relies on to like book the meal place and send out the time and book the calendar invite. Like you're either that person and kind of is the coordinator, or you're the person who does other things. Like you will have natural things that you do out there in the world, and some of the modes should hopefully gel with what you do. You don't have to do them in a working context. Frequently, the things that we naturally do out there in the world are the things that we'll find the most natural and easy to do in a work context. Like I natter, out in the real world. I natter good in work context. I organize stuff in our house. I organize stuff at work. Like those are things, like these are not, work isn't this magical kingdom that we can only do stuff in. And so think about, particularly if you're a student, how you interact with a team when you're working on assignments and what that can tell you about how you like to work and which assignments you liked, or even think back to school or how you work in your sports team. Like all of these things are relevant to helping you understand who are you and what do you like and what are you best at? And all of those things are the things that help you find a role that you can really thrive in.
Yeah. Maybe just sometimes you can ask some feedback from your friends, your group members also, it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't necessarily, sometimes you don't know yourself the best.
Yes. Okay. So what sort of questions would you ask in an interview to help you identify which modes might be needed for a role?
Basically all the questions around what am I expecting to do in the day-to-day, or like those are all focused around like kind of modes of working. And so from the answer, you'll get like if the answer is, well, we've got a comprehensive documentation and we want you to be like, you'll be in charge of that, and that's kind of like your focus, you know that a part of the role is going to be documentation. If the answer is team delivery execution, you know you're going to be in delivery mode. So it's more about like just asking probing questions and prompting those, right? Like when you're talking to recruiters and positioning yourself as I'm good at these things. I'm looking for roles that are in these things. Like I know someone in the chat earlier said that design mode sounded really awesome. Positioning yourself as being someone who's, I love creating and working with people to build new products and or services. Those are all about positioning yourself inside the market and not just within a single role. But yeah, probing questions around the day-to-day and not the exciting opportunities, like literally the day-to-day. If you're going to be spending 40 hours a week doing something, you want to not hate it, I guess is the point.
Okay, thank you. Just a reminder that if you want to, you can vote for the questions that you want to be answered. Because we have maybe 4 minutes, we will just go to maybe 2 or 3. So please have a look and you can vote for the questions you want. Yeah, the next question is, let me take this one. How do you find the maturity of the business you are working with impacts the modes?
Oh, that's a good question that I have not thought about enough to answer off the bat. I suspect, I'd have to think about it, but I'd suspect that it'll be either a combination of like the maturity means that you're locked into like a really narrow definition of a BA mode, or you're expected to do everything. Sorry, that's a terrible answer. I'll have to think about it. I'll mail that and I'll post about it.
Okay, so please follow Hannah on LinkedIn and yeah.
For an answer to that specific question.
Yes, because now it's moving. I will take this one. Okay, back. I find it hard to run refinements in a delivery role because I don't have a technical background. Any advice for me?
Get your nerd on. So like I don't have a technical background, but like you definitely need, if you're operating a technical team, you need to understand the shape of stuff. I think there's a point where you don't need to know, like I've got no actual idea, like I think electricity drips out, like should drip out of the wall, like literally not technical, but I can talk quite comprehensively around a Jamstack software system or an API layer and how the interfaces work. Like you need to understand the shape of the things you're dealing with, even if you don't understand how to code. So highly recommend actually just getting your nerd on, like running. One of the best things I ever did was do a teach yourself a JS course, because then I had to like get a GitHub account, bring down code, and just genuinely that understanding of like, what is these things is how you become really awesome at that, because it also means that you can challenge in, you can start building up patterns of, when is the developer kind of taking the piss? And when is this thing doesn't make sense when I kind of hold it together with my technical knowledge. So yeah, it's about digging in is what I'd recommend. It's really, really hard to like offer high levels of value in a technical role, in a technical team, if you don't have enough to be familiar. The handy thing is most technical people love talking about the technicals. So this is not going to be a thing. Well, you might have some people that don't like answering questions. But most commonly, if you ask them nerdy questions, they're going to be like, do you have an hour? And they will tell you about their thing. And as long as you're not interrupting their work, you can pick up a hell of a lot in context of just building that knowledge. And don't be afraid to keep on asking dumb questions. Be like, you said this. Does it mean this? Does this how it holds together? If I draw these two boxes with these lines, does that kind of represent what you just said? All of that.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Hannah, maybe just choose one question you want to answer. You want to have a quick look?
I haven't done any online BA training, so I wouldn't want to recommend anything.
Okay, so this one.
I would say, yes, you can definitely get from systems analyst to business analyst. It's about focusing on the parts of your role that isn't too deep in the system and talking about the business context around the system. If that's what you mean by systems analyst, that you've been in the system, just bridge out. Like, get out, be like, why is the system there? What is it doing? What value is it adding? How can I make it better? Those are all BA questions.
Yeah, we have one question about DA. Yeah, maybe centralizing to BA for the most should. Yeah.
If that's the last question, I'll go with, I don't know. I would kind of settle like, but that shows I like digital business analysis more than data analysis. So like, I think that you'd upskill the other way around. So someone transitioning to a VA role, what mode should you concentrate on and how? My answer to that is entirely depends on you. It depends on what you've got natural talent in and how you want to work. Because like what I did worked for me because of my set of skills and the opportunities I had. It won't work for other people unless you clone me and do me again. So you really want to like dig into what makes you tick and focus there, because you're never going to be those dream roles where you're like, like work is fun, I love it, if you don't focus on the things that actually make you happy.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because we are running out of time, so we will maybe after the event we'll list the question to Hannah. If there is any question that she want to answer, we will try to include the answers in the email, follow-up email. And Hannah, thank you so much for sharing all the valuable insights. And a big thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. And after the event, we will upload the recording on our YouTube channel soon. And you can review the events if you want to. And if you enjoy the event, please tell your friends about our meetup group. Our next event is on the 2nd of October, where we will be talking about web accessibility. So please keep an eye on the event announcement. Okay, it's all for today. Thank you, everyone, and hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, team. See you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Hannah. Sure.